Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Cecilia, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you have joined us for our next live presentation from Highland Copper. Please note you can submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I am very pleased to welcome Barry O'Shea, Chief Executive Officer and Director of Highland Copper, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol HDRSF and on the TSXV under the symbol HI. Welcome back, Barry.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to introduce Highland. Highland has the Copperwood project, and it has a 34% joint venture interest in the White Pine project, both in the historic Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a really wonderful district to operate. And certainly, and as you know, as investors are looking now, they're seeing obviously a really nice move in copper prices, and I'd say it's been long awaited to some degree. Obviously, looking for ways to play in the copper space. Money often flows into the seniors, base metal producers at a start of a cycle. And I think we've seen some of that, but there's some really nice opportunities also on the explorer and developer side. But I would say copper is a little different to gold, where there are a whole host of investments available. In copper, there are less, certainly on the developer side. And if you really hone in on your criteria, thinking about developers in tier one jurisdictions and further developers that are fully permitted, arguably the list becomes only one, and that is Highland Copper. So you'll hear me talking about three key things as we walk through the presentation. And first and foremost is that Copperwood arguably is the only fully permitted project in its immediate peer group. Number two, I believe it's the most highly leveraged to changes in copper price, again, providing some significant optionality. And third, I think you'll see that Michigan is truly re-emerging as a fantastic jurisdiction to operate, and you'll see reasons why. So overall, it tells you that Highland gives you significant optionality, both in terms of the net asset value of our projects, but with permits in hand, also our ability to transition to development and operations. And naturally, I'll understand that there's a different valuation methodology as you step towards being a producer. So before I get into the story a little further, I'm just going to deal with copper. And as I say, I think there's been a long-awaited move in terms of the copper price. There's a well-documented scarcity from a copper perspective. There's also a well-documented global supply-demand imbalance. But interestingly, when you look at that imbalance even closer on a U.S. basis, it gets even more pronounced. So historically, that would have been dealt with through imports. But the world has changed geopolitically, and that's arguably not the case anymore. So with the U.S. focus on both resource independence and the energy transition, there's certainly a case to be made that projects like Copperwood and our JV White Pine simply need to be built. And you're seeing Michigan and the U.S. act, certainly both in terms of funding, state grants, tax credits, so on and so forth. And when you combine that federal and state jurisdiction with our local presence in the Upper Peninsula historic mining district and our welcome there, we truly firmly believe that we're in the right jurisdiction. Permits are key. We have them. When you think about investing in mining companies, there's a binary call to be made as to whether or not the project can actually be built. Permits define that capacity, and we certainly have that. And truly believe there's a read-through as well, thinking about our permitting at Copperwood as a read-through to our capacity to permit a White Pine. And I'll also take you through the assets and the scale, sometimes surprising as investors look at them. But the scale of the asset really give rise to long-lived assets that are well-funded and truly ready to move into the development and operation cycle. But first, a specific mention to Michigan. There are very few jurisdictions worldwide that are both permitting and considering incentivizing mining. I'll walk you through a proposed grant from Michigan Economic Development Corporation for $50 million and help you understand the ways in which Michigan is really working towards bringing mining back to this region. There's a state-led permitting process, which obviously we've been the beneficiaries of with permits in hand, and naturally looking downstate access to OEMs, the likes of Ford, GM, and Stellantis from an offtake perspective. So a whole host of reasons why this is a good place to operate. You'll see as well that the two projects are in very close proximity, and we think we'll share a whole host of synergies. So I think it is important to acknowledge that while we have JV'd our second project, the White Pine project, I don't think it's the end of these two projects being together in the future. So we'll look at the assets now. And as I said, I think it sometimes catches investors a little off guard when they see the scale of both projects. Both are multi-billion pound resources, and maybe as a starting point, I'll focus in on Copperwood, which we think is a fantastic first step back into the region. There's 1.8 billion pounds of M&I, 54 million tons at a 1.5%, so a nice strong grade. And that's what gives rise to our initial 11-year mine life, 30,000 tons of production at a respectable capital intensity to step in from a construction perspective. But I would definitely also point you to the additional 79 million tons of inferred that are not in the current mine plan. But adding those on, we certainly believe that we're going to be in the 15 to 20-year mine life. I'd also acknowledge, as I've said, we're at current feasibility study that was completed by G Mining in 2023. Permits in hand, truly a project that's ready for construction decision and forward. And very nicely sequenced is the White Pine project that we've JV'd alongside our partner, Kinterra. Bigger asset again, 22-year mine life, 42,000 tons copper production. That's on a 100% basis at a PEA level. So it's probably 2 to 3 years behind Copperwood, but with Kinterra's financial strength and technical strength in this particular area of the mine cycle, that project is now moving through feasibility and permitting, and we think will be nicely sequenced once Copperwood is in development. So permitting is important. These are the 7 state permits required to both construct and operate in Michigan. Being on private land, there's no need of permitting from a federal perspective. And certainly as we think about how we've operated in Michigan, what it's meant is just a very prescriptive process where the state is not looking to trip you up. Obviously there's a stringent set of mining code in Michigan, provided you demonstrate that you are looking to meet or exceed the standards. They're certainly looking to bring mining back because naturally in Michigan and in the US, copper is needed from an electrification perspective. As I said, I think there's a nice read through on White Pine here, and certainly Kinterra are active at the moment preparing permit applications, environmental baselining, and ideally stepping into the full permitting process in 2025. So I also want to take just a quick moment to talk about that JV transaction because we think it's really unlocked our capacity to actively advance both projects. And if you see what we did, we sold 2/3, so 66% of White Pine for $30 million. And that money is not ring-fenced in any way. It's going directly into Copperwood. So that has allowed us to move actively forward on Copperwood. We're doing some site work at the moment, maintaining our permits in good standing and looking to proceed to detailed engineering. At the same time, Kinterra committed a separate $30 million to go into White Pine itself. So we're already into the second drill program for the purposes of collecting samples for both met and geotech, and naturally thinking about how we step forward from a permitting perspective. But really what it tells you is that, if we look back a year ago, we had about $5 million in the bank and modest capacity to move either project forward proactively. This transaction gave us $30 million into Copperwood, $30 million into White Pine without any corporate dilution, and really has unlocked our ability to advance the projects in what arguably were challenging markets, ones that we see turning at this point. And naturally, it's the companies that are advancing that get seen as investment comes back into our sector. And so looking at the pro forma, I think you'll get an understanding of the significant value to unlock here. Looking specifically at Copperwood, and I'll start at $4. That's the price at which we did our current feasibility study. It's good economics, 18% IRR, 170 million NPV. But you can really see the leverage to copper price changes here. A 25% increase in copper price to $5 gives rise to a 300% increase in the net present value. So you can really see that torque. And that doesn't include the potential $50 million grant that we're looking to get from the state. And it also excludes any other optimizations, particularly mine life additions that we can bring in. So you really see the capacity to get an NPV that's well in excess of the initial CapEx to really drive that project into development. And looking across at White Pine, and on that side, I'm showing you just our 34% stake. So again, for simplicity, at $5, it's about a $500 million valuation, similar to our 100% stake in Copperwood. So on consolidated basis, a really, fantastic net asset valuation target of in excess of $1 billion. Now, our enterprise value today is in the $40 million range. And often when you see discounts of that nature, there may be an issue from a permitting perspective, maybe the technical issue with the project, or arguably a jurisdictional issue. Well, we don't have any of those. So I think it's important to take a look at the substance of the company and consider whether or not there's a fundamental issue or not, which we believe there certainly isn't. From our perspective, it's just the fact that copper developers have been overlooked for a period of time. But as I mentioned, money is now flowing back into base metals. Naturally, it goes into the seniors first. And then as it comes down cycle, I think money that moves into the junior development world will look directly to projects that are in good jurisdictions, permitted and ready to be built, and naturally will be strong from our valuation perspective. So a few slides now on each of our respective projects. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that we've designed the Copperwood project to be responsible from a community and from an environmental perspective. We truly believe that mining can be done right. Naturally, listen, there is an environmental impact to mining, but what mining companies can do is seek to minimize that impact and also offset or mitigate it. In addition to producing a metal, that copper in particular, that has a natural offset from an electrification perspective. But to that end, this is an underground mine, so modest impact certainly relative to open pit. We specifically elected not to draw water from Lake Superior, certainly having listened to local concerns. Relative to the wetland that we will impact, we're preserving an area of 10 times that value. So you'll understand there's a host of reasons that in addition to adding 370 much needed jobs to the region, operating well from an environmental perspective, we are truly welcome. And I think a reflection of that is the grant that we're under consideration for, and I'd like to give you a quick update on that. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation proposed a grant for $50 million. That was in January of this year, and we're steadily moving through the approval processes. The first level was the Michigan Strategic Fund that approved the grant in March of this year. Then it moved to the legislative level in June. The House approved the $50 million grant, and we're currently working with the Senate Appropriations Committee, and we truly look forward to a positive outcome in that instance. Here's another quick view of the leveraged copper price. And, we've just moved past the 450 mark, so the net present value of the project is moving significantly. But I will acknowledge, of course, waiting for copper price changes certainly isn't an out-and-out game plan, and there's a host of value creation optimizations that we're working towards. Certainly thinking about mine life additions. There are other process and mining optimizations that we believe we're seeking towards, and other grants, both from a federal and state perspective. So there's a whole host of ways to continue to improve the project. But really at this point, it's a matter of execution and aggressively moving towards a construction decision. We really think that's what's going to unlock the significant value. Obviously, copper price moves the net asset value of the project along, but our intent and movement towards a construction decision gives increasing certainty towards production and cash flow. So we're doing early site works at the moment. I'd certainly speak quickly about our exemplary environmental work, setting up mitigating streams and wetlands to offset the impacts that we have that have really given us a significant amount of credibility in the local region. And now we're preparing for detailed engineering. I think we're stepping into a copper price environment, a capital markets environment that will allow us to raise capital to build the project. We want to be ready from a design perspective, and we'll step into detailed engineering in the near term. And just a few slides on White Pine as well. So this is actually showing the project at 100%. And you'll see this is of significant scale. You can understand why it would be of great value to Kinterra. Given the capex, though, and acknowledging that it's second in our priority list, you'll also understand why we sought to have a JV partner. And from our perspective, that decision has worked out very well. While we're actively working on Copperwood, putting our time and capital in, Kinterra is putting their time, capital, and energy into White Pine and really advancing it. White Pine is a past producer. It operated for 50 years, as I mentioned, already an additional 20 plus years defined on the PEA level with some significant infrastructure on site. You'll see power, and rail and water are already coming into sight, and of importance, historic tailings that can be used as you step into the new mine life. So very modest footprint going forward from a brownfield perspective. And again, it's a matter of execution on White Pine also, and we're seeing that execution from Kinterra. They're already coming to the tail end of the second drill program for the purposes of met and geotech samples. They're doing their environmental baselining, preparing applications, and really looking forward to getting this project in the next 2 to 3 years to feasibility, fully permitted, and ready to be sequenced shortly after Copperwood. And a quick look from the investor side. A really strong set of investors at the top of the list being Orion Mine Finance. They've been long-term, very supportive shareholders. Our capital structure as needed, as you think about a developer, is in good shape. Modest options outstanding, no warrants outstanding, net cash of $18 million in the bank. So really the capacity to keep moving the projects quickly. And we've also really gained the interest of two brokerages, both Cormark and Paradigm, coming on recently. And I think as the copper price moves, I think we'll continue to see extreme interest from all brokerages. And, we've achieved a lot in the last 18 months. As I mentioned, we brought both projects to current study, feasibility and PEA. We naturally completed the transaction with Kinterra, put capital into both projects, advanced, really well from a state funding perspective, and certainly looking forward to a positive outcome there. And most recently, we've put a senior project director in place. And I think that can be taken as a real indicator of our sincerity now to step this project into the next phase of development. And so from that perspective, there's a whole host of catalysts. We're going to maintain our good standing in terms of our permits, complete our early site work, putting some nice capital behind us in the project, and really looking for the catalyst of moving towards project funding and a construction decision. On the White Pine side, drill results in terms of the resource update that Kinterra have been working through, ideally a resource update itself in the first half of 2025, and just continued progress to sequence White Pine after Copperwood. And certainly the most important catalyst, as I think about the near term, is the final approval from the state of Michigan of the $50 million state grant. It's obviously not just a strong financial boost to the project, but it's an ongoing endorsement from the state of Michigan. And so really from a big picture perspective, we're looking to be the regional first entrance back into this region of Michigan. We have social license to operate and a community that truly wants us. We have the capacity to, with permits in hand, to really move this project to near-term cash flow. As I mentioned, significant leverage to copper price, and I think we're going to see that elasticity, certainly from a share price perspective, as dollars move back into the junior end of the mining cycle. And some really nice asset strategy options. As I mentioned, we've JV'd White Pine, but there's certainly a case to be made that these projects come back together as the whole region comes together. The bigger prize, certainly from a consolidated basis, is 20 plus years of 70,000 plus copper ton production in the coming period. So certainly I would urge investors to take a look at our company. I think that, as I mentioned, there are only a handful of investment options similar to us. And I think we also know that there's going to be one-on-one opportunities. So certainly welcome any investors to meet in the coming days. So with that, I will wrap up the presentation and I'll take a few questions that I see here in the chat box. So the first question is Copperwood a greenfield project? And the answer is yes. So I mentioned, obviously, White Pine is a past producer. But Copperwood was, it's been being advanced for the last 10 to 15 years. Through geology, through permitting, through engineering. So much of that, the risk that you might see in all of those areas has been put behind us. But yeah, it is a greenfield project that we're looking to bring into operation. What is the history of white pine and how did you gain control? Yeah, it was kind of through 2019. There was an earn-in right that we concluded in 2021 by placing the financial bond. So we've been working on that asset for a period of time to gain 100% control of it. Naturally, though, when we had it, we felt that we needed to find the appropriate partner to advance it, and we've done that with Kinterra. As a question here, what is the timeline on the $50 million grant? Well, as I mentioned, we're certainly having to demonstrate patience here. It's been every 2 to 3 months that we've kind of sequentially gotten through the respective levels of approval. Arguably, we're at that point with the Senate now. We're certainly very active with them to help educate them and help them understand, how we will operate from an environmental perspective, and of course, the benefits when you think about jobs created and domestic supply of copper into Michigan itself. So demonstrating patience, I won't give you a timeline other than to say that we're looking to try to get that done in as near term as possible. And then the last question here is, when do you think we could be in production? So what I will say is, certainly for single asset developers like us, the only thing that we are at the mercy of is project financing. And that, of course, means you need to have very healthy capital markets at your back. And we think that those markets are coming. In the meantime, we're controlling what we can control. Obviously, we're doing our early site works to prepare the site for construction and stepping into detailed engineering such that when we think we have the right markets, and let's say for a moment that that's going to be in 2025, we would look to advance the project financing. In an example of that nature, we will be constructing in early 2026. And it's about a 2.5 year window to full-scale production at Copperwood. So in that example, 2028. And really, that's only a few years away. I've certainly seen some media recently that has reflected the scale of time that it takes to, from initial find to bring a project in the US into production, and it's arguably 15 to 20 plus years. So in the scheme of things, these projects are extremely short-dated. I'm very pleased to have them in our portfolio. So with that, I'll thank you very much for attending. I think, as noted, there are one-on-one availabilities. We certainly look forward to meeting with investors and helping you understand the investment opportunity in front of you here. Thank you.